Take a peek at us, Nick. And
Sure
today
thing.
we're going to talk about incident, really elevating your incident management, leveraging automation and AI. I think it's something that everybody's talking about. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're at. Welcome again to our webinar, Elevating Incident Management, Leveraging Automation and AI. I'm Ken Gavranovic, the COO of Blameless, and joining me today is our Principal Solution Engineer, Nick Mason. Today, we're going to dive into the cutting edge kind of area of proactive reliability management and kind of resilience engineering. A little bit about myself, I always do just a brief intro. Back in the day, I was the CEO and founder of a company called Web.com, one of the early cloud computing systems. I did digital transformation at Cox, where I ran a lot of systems that if they went down for 10 minutes, it could be a $50 million outage. You might have heard of DealerTrack, Kelley Blue Book, Auto Trader, some of the brands that I worked with there. Was at New Relic, which really helped monitor most of the internet, I think 30–40% of it. So been doing this a long time in a lot of different companies, really focused on how do we drive efficiency? How do we get more time to do high value work? So Nick, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yep, appreciate that, Ken. How's it going, everyone? Nick Mason, as Ken said, Principal Solutions Engineer here at Blameless. And a little bit about me. I started my career off as a software engineer. I was working with companies like NV Energy and Caesars Las Vegas. And then most recently, I worked at an AI and automation startup that was focused on creating what we call digital employees. So incorporating a lot of process automation, natural language processing into a nice, package so that you can communicate through a tool like Slack or Microsoft Teams. Hence why I joined Blameless, right? I experienced some of the issues that we are trying to solve today as a software engineer. And I saw a lot of the need when I was working at that automation company, and what Blameless is doing to help both those areas really excited me. So really excited to have this conversation today, something that I know Ken and I are both very passionate about. So I think it's going to be a good one.
Great. So Aaron, if you could just add the Comms Assistant demo link in the chat for everybody. And the chat should be open, so you should be able to go and put questions in there. Feel free to put them in now. We'll address those questions towards the end of the webinar. But again, put any questions in there and we'll try to answer all that we can. Now, digging in and kind of setting the stage and, a rapidly evolving digital environment, reliability really is a competitive advantage. And I think everybody, is always doing this delicate balance is how do we put more product features that our customers want, hopefully the ones that they do want, right, while maintaining reliability. And if you think about it historically, it used to be you had a monolithic application and pretty much either the whole thing's up or the whole thing's down. We've changed that. We've gone into microservices, which has allowed us to build even faster and go faster. But then the complexity of what's up and what's down. We've had situations where the core application's up, but maybe a reporting functionality's there. Maybe there's intermittent failures, and this becomes really complex as you build really deep enterprise applications. Nick, I was talking to one of the large public streaming companies that we probably all use at our house. And they had an issue with a big live outage, right? That we all, it's one of those things you don't want to have when you don't like your outages when they're on newspaper reports, but it was really related to a team that was upstream from them had an issue that really wasn't reported in a consistent way. And so the two teams had two different services, but they didn't really know about that impact. And I think that complexity is there. And then I think the other part, you have investment. I think in this kind of tough economic times, especially for technology, I think it's hit it, probably a little bit harder than other areas. Every engineering leader is being challenged to do more with less. And so that delicate balance of how do we drive reliability? How do we drive features is hard as a software leader, but it really even affects, kind of practitioners that are really focused on reliability even more. Nick, why don't you share a little bit about your thoughts and kind of how, a typical practitioner's having to kind of have that delicate balance of how do we go faster, but we've got these reliability issues and concerns.
Yeah, 100% Ken. Yeah, I talk to, hundreds and hundreds of different prospects and customers year over year about kind of their journey and different ways that they're trying to solve this problem. And oftentimes what I see early on is that, you're stringing a lot of different tools together. You have some sort of chat tool, you're creating some sort of ticketing tool into that combination. You're maybe trying to create something from scratch to bring all of these different tools together so that you don't have disparate data systems. And ultimately, what I've seen is that this really doesn't scale when you're trying to manage that delicate balance between reliability, but then also pushing innovation when it comes to product development. And that's a lot of the times when we start a conversation with a prospect, it's like, hey, whatever we're doing right now is really not scaling. We're trying to put a good process in place so that we can understand what's working and what's not working, but we really don't have anything to kind of bring everything together, right? Which, the glue, if you would be something like a Blameless. So it's definitely a real pain that we see out there. It's usually the same set of criteria over and over again that we see from customers. They're trying to drive communication, they're trying to drive process efficiency, they're trying to also drive process optimization, but they really don't know how they can get to that step.
And that makes sense, Nick. And I think that's the important part, because I know a lot of times, like I was talking to a credit card processing company, and they were really, really focused on how do we fix incidents faster, which is really important, right? You want to have a tool, Slack or Teams, where it integrates with your ServiceNow and your Jira, and so you absolutely need that. But a lot of times companies think about, well, what about communications? Because when you have an outage, often the engineering teams or the practitioners that are in the fixing mode, they know what's going on, but it's super costly to your organization if the other people, like your customer success, your sales team, your executive team, doesn't get the information that they need when they need it. And I think that there's a real revolution happening here across the board, but this generative AI, I think in particular, is going to be super, super powerful for driving efficiency and integration when you have something that really not just focuses on the incident fixing, but then the communication, then the metadata, like, okay, how do we do a retrospective? It's crazy when I hear of companies that they say they're too busy to do a retrospective, and I get it, but if you do that, you might keep learning the same lesson over and over again. How do you really have that continuous improvement? So anyways, let's dig into, the power of AI, automation, incident management, and what's really exciting, a lot of times when you have talks like this, we're talking about, in 2 years and 3 years, generative AI is here right now. I think about it like I have groups of friends that, like, many of us use it to do a second shot on our email, personally. We have to watch our kids because they might be using it a little bit too much, but it's certainly there in our personal lives. But it's also very, very quickly coming straight into our business lives too, to help us, to help our teams do things faster so that we can focus on the high value work. Because, for example, like rewording some document, for different personas, certainly we could do that. Is that the best use of an engineer's time in the middle of an outage? Probably not. And today I'm actually happy to share, Jim and I did a thing, and today we're actually going to demo it live, Comms Assistant. We actually have already integrated, and we have customers using the first version of our technology, which is going to keep coming on that, called Comms Assistant. So I don't want to take away some of your thunder, Nick. I'll let you do that a little bit more. But, why is AI important? It's because it really allows human beings. It's not, I don't believe AI is going to take away the high value things that people do. It's going to take away the low value things that we do. It's going to automate processes. It's going to eliminate toil. It's going to, automatically help us discover the things that we should be thinking, talking about. So I think, some of the initial things we'll see is AI driven communications, workflow automation, automation around retrospectives. And, the last one, it's really exciting. I won't mention which company, but I was talking to a credit reporting agency the other day, and the CTO, he said, Ken, what I really want to see from you and Blameless is you've got my data, tell me what's going to break before it breaks. And again, who knows if we have people that are competitors on the line, but I'll say some really, really super exciting stuff that we'll be sharing over the next couple of months. But the exciting part about all of this is that we're working on it now, and it's live now. Earlier, Aaron posted a link to a demo of Comms Assist. We also will do a full AI demo for you. We just have to do that under NDA. This is a webinar. It's open up to the public, so we're only going to focus on what's already publicly available. So Nick, I don't want to put you on the spot, but why don't you do a little demo for customers and
Yeah.
talk about something, I would take the whole thing, but one of the things that's so painful, and by the way, I've actually even been this executive, is like your executives join your Slack channels and they're in the middle of it, or your sales teams texting your CTO. This is a really big problem of getting everybody on the same page. Maybe you kind of walk it through, as kind of a day in the life, if you would mind.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, just for everybody out there, the cool part about signing up for that link is you'll be talking with me. So familiar face out there, get a demo. We can go deeper into it. I was just talking with a large financial company that's actually coming on board with us. We just signed the contract. They're coming on board. They're doing their onboarding. And they were literally talking about that exact same use case that you talked about, Ken. They're like, even sub 4 incidents, our CEO is still hopping in, right? And there's many VPs and all these different leadership in between, that CEO and the stakeholders that are boots on the ground. And the person is still getting involved, right? And it's like, hey, like you need to get information, but you really don't need to be in the channel, right? What does that do? Like as an engineer, it's going to stress us out. It's going to make us feel like we need to be perfect. And again, going back to that blameless culture, it's okay to make a mistake, right? But you need to understand what mistakes you're making and how we can improve on those in the future. But yeah, I'm really excited to demo this. If you have additional questions, hit that link, sign up. We can definitely set up a conversation and do a deep dive. We can talk about some of the areas that we'll be going into the future. But what I'd really love to do is I'd like to put ourselves in the shoes of an engineer working on an incident, right? So what you're seeing here, and Ken, just give me a thumbs up if you're seeing my Slack screen here.
Yep.
We're in an incident, right? We're having a conversation. We're adding.
Nick, I don't mean to interrupt you, but just one thing I just wanted to jump in to set this up a little bit is one of the things that we're seeing companies to address this is how do you make sure your executives get that? And Nick, I apologize if I take anything, but I just want to make sure to set this up. And so we're going to walk through a situation. But one of the things we recommend customers to do is set up an executive channel, set up a support channel, set up a sales channel. So that way, instead of your sales team paging and calling and reading or customer support, they can go to that channel every single time and see the information that they need to know about the incidents that they care about in a way that's accessible to them. So for example, sales wants to know how they might be able to, if a customer asks them a question, how they would inform it. And so what Nick, I think what you're going to go through is that you've set that up already as a company. You've got your executive channel, your sales channel, your support channel.
Yep.
You're an engineer in an issue. And one of the things with Blameless you can do is you can set up like reminders. Hey, every 15 minutes, our executive team or whoever wants to get updated. So they're in an incident. You're an engineer in the incident. You've got Blameless. You've set up those channels. And we're going to talk about that, right?
Yep, exactly. And that's exactly what we're having here, right? We're in the middle of an incident. We've been having back and forth conversations. We're getting automatic messages from Blameless saying, hey, every 15 minutes, because this is a Sev 1 incident, you need to make sure that we're notifying the right stakeholders to let them know what's happening to avoid having those different personas pop into the channel, right? This should be an environment that engineers feel comfortable in and also dedicate their time towards solving problems, rather than having to make sure that everybody is feeling comfortable and aware, right? That natural communication is going to happen by using a tool like Blameless. And this is exactly where the comms assistant is going to come into play, right? Just as Ken said, we have our customer success channel, we have our executive channel, we have a support channel. And you can see here, I got a message saying, hey, every 15 minutes, because this is a Sev 1, we need to go update that executive channel so that I can keep Ken, as much as I love having conversations with you, I want to keep you out of this channel, right? So what I could do here is I can run /blameless create comms. And what this is going to do is it's going to pull open our communication portal within Slack, right? And, think about as an engineer, we all speak a very specific language when it comes to what have we done? What are we doing to solve this problem? And not every persona speaks the same language, right? And as a solutions engineer, I totally understand this because I'm speaking with engineers, I'm speaking with sales, I'm speaking with product, I'm speaking with marketing. And if I just said, hey, here's a message, right? And yeah, I'll go ahead.
Nick, before you read that message, just want to jump in. And I just want to just add that is, for those of us that have been on big outage calls, oftentimes companies hire somebody that's literally on maybe a telephone call, and they're asking the engineer who's in the middle of fixing things, okay, what does that mean? I'm rewording it to go to the executive channel. And if the executives or the sales team, they might not be jumping the sales channel, but then they're texting, they're paging your CTO, your CIO. There's a lot of noise of communication behind the scenes. And so this is something that really can knock that out in one part. So that if you're that engineer that's under stress, you're not having to wordsmith the document with somebody else. So, all right, you've got an example, Nick, go ahead.
It's distracting, Ken, right? Like that's the whole thing is like, if I'm getting a DM from my CEO saying, hey, what's the update? And then I'm getting another DM from my sales team because they're getting messages from their customers, it's pulling me away from solving that problem, right? And then you have the extra stress of, well, if I'm sending this message to you, Ken, is it going to sound good? Is it going to make sure that you know what's going on, right? And that's the challenge that we're really trying to solve here, right? So I have a message here. We're experiencing a 503 error due to a malfunctioning Kubernetes pod in our East US region. Looks like this upstream service decided to take a nap. And again, this part right here is a little bit extreme, but it's going to show the real powers. Like I would never send that message to you, Ken, but that might be how I'm talking to my fellow engineers, right? That's how we're talking about the problem that we're facing. This caused our payments gateway to go down. We're investigating if this is an AWS issue or related to a recent Terraform change. Teams are running Postman to see if they can replicate the cause of the malfunction, which may be related to garbage collection in Node. We cannot take payments on our Alpha app until this is resolved, right? So there's a lot of technical jargon in here. There's a lot of, engineer to engineer speak. But what I want to do is I want to update my executive channel. So what our AI comms assistant is going to do is we have these 3 different personas: executive, sales, and support. And go back to that language that I talked about beforehand. Each one of these personas is going to need to get information that we're saying in slightly different ways, right? So for example, executives, they're going to need something that's a little bit more professional looking, right? So that they can respond back to, maybe they're getting paged, like you said, Ken, from a customer, and you need to make sure that you can respond back to them. Or a sales team, they might need to get very basic information on, how long has this been down? When is it going to be up? How many customers are impacted, right? So what we did here is we said, hey, I want to translate this into something that executives are going to really understand and relate to. So we translated it, and here we are. We're currently experiencing a service disruption in our East US region, resulting in temporary outage on our payments gateway on the Alpha app. This may be caused by a malfunctioning component in our systems. Our teams are investigating the root cause, which could be related to a recent change in our AWS issue. We are working to resolve this issue as quickly as possible to minimize the impact on our customers, right? So what this is it's a lot more concise, it's a lot more forward, and it's a lot more professional. And what I could do here now is I could say, hey, again, we have that executive channel. I can go ahead, I can send this off. And again, doing it in the Blameless channel, we're documenting what's said at what time, who's getting that message. And then here's you, Ken, you're sitting over here in our executive channel. You're getting this nice, clear, concise information about the incident so that you don't have to hop into that channel. You're getting all of the information that you need. And the same thing could be said. We can go through the same process for our support channel. We can go through the same process for our sales channel.
Yeah, and we've timed this. If you go back to the part where you were sending it, Nick,
yeah.
is a couple of things for everybody is obviously we went through that super slow, but if you think about what we just did is, so you get a notification, I've got to update it. You paste it, you click executive, you click send or sales, and then you click generate, it's generating, you click send and you're done. So if you think about it, you would have had to spend a bunch of time to figure out what you're going to do, have to reword it. It literally turns it down into seconds, which allows you and your team to get focused back on driving the engineering, driving the fixing, driving the resolution, and you can have confidence that your leadership team, your sales team, your customer support team is getting the information they know. It automatically has reminders for your engineers to update them, and you can set whatever policy is appropriate for your organization. This is a great way to save a tremendous amount of time and money throughout your entire organization. So super excited. A couple of questions that we often get. One of the things that we do is we call it secure AI. So when we go out and integrate with the various AI solutions today, it's ChatGPT and the OpenAI product, but we've designed our system so that in the future, if you wanted to use Bard or maybe you have your own instance, you can put your own credentials. So you can either use our instance where it works automatically, or you could put your own ChatGPT instance or your own Bard instance or your own maybe private instance. And again, you can change that in the future. So you have complete portability and how you train the models and everything, which is great. Your security team's on this. I've talked to a lot of CISOs. This is, we think, the way that generative AI should be integrated into SaaS solutions. So super excited about that. And Nick, I think we've got like even more things, coming up. Again, we're going to talk very lightly because we don't have NDAs on the call right now. So we'll just do a light version of it. But, certainly when you see this and people have seen this and they're having conversations, they're already using it to save a tremendous amount of time. And to get better credibility with their partners in the organization. So if you haven't done this, this is great. Again, we'd love to show you the demo of this particular functionality, and we can talk through, if you're under NDA, some of the other things that we have coming up. But so let's talk a little bit at a high level on some of the other things, because if you think about it, an incident assistant, how do we get people more informed quickly? That's going to be great. Yeah. So more things coming there. Or even you think about on retros, because there's a lot of very manual work there that that's a very logical thing. We've got some really great stuff with retros. Maybe Nick, give them a little bit of a hint, but again, not too much detail until we get NDAs.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, if you're interested, hit that link in the chat and that Aaron popped in there, and love to have a conversation with it. It's funny, Ken, like I said, I've had a lot of conversations over the past couple of weeks showcasing Comms Assistant to a lot of different prospects, existing Blameless customers. And it seems like once we start to show that first layer that we just showed here today, a lot of the mindset goes towards the exact same thing, right? Blameless is a system of record. You have all of this data from the incident. You have all these timestamps, tags, all of the information from your timeline, right? How do I use this to make sure that stakeholders, whether, they're brand new into the incident channel, they're trying to get up to speed, or they're trying to do their retrospective after the fact, they're trying to put pen on paper, and they're just trying to get that summary put together. How do we actually use this data to our advantage, right? So it's funny, I literally just got off of a call right before this webinar with a prospect who they're in their final stages of a proof of concept. And they were talking about, okay, like this comms assistant is really cool, because they were having that same issue where leadership pops into the channel, it stresses their engineers out, and we were kind of nerding out over that. And the next question she asked me was, okay, have you thought about summarizing what's going on so that as new individuals pop into the channel, they have an up-to-date summary of what's happened, what have we tried, how long has the incident been running on for? And that's the really cool part about generative AI is we have all of this information in there. When somebody pops into the channel, they should be greeted with this nice summary message that's up to date, because we all know that, we have those description fields where somebody put a little basic information at the beginning of the incident and then nobody comes and touches it ever again, right? We've all been there. We can all relate to that. And I think the cool part about this is that let's utilize that data that we have in the channel so that as new stakeholders come in, they get up to date, they quickly understand what's worked, what hasn't worked, so that you're not repeating steps, right? One common thing that I've heard a lot of people say is that, hey, I'm an engineer on call, right? I was paged in and I come into the channel and I immediately have to read 400 Slack messages, right? That's going to take a long time that we don't have, right? So what we're thinking about doing here is it's like, hey, let's go ahead and summarize exactly what's happening at that given moment. So as soon as that on-call engineer is brought in, they know exactly what they've already tried, what's already been worked on, what they're responsible for doing, and contribute as quickly as possible. And I know you have a lot of opinions on this too, Ken.
Yeah. Yes, and again, if you want us to go into more details, again with the NDA, we could go through the whole roadmap. Just go to the link that Aaron put down there. But at the high level, and I'll just say this because some people get right off the bat. This is not too proprietary for us to share. But think about how much time you spend in a retrospective, organizing timelines, making sure that the relevant thing is there. Maybe somebody overlooked a piece of data that's really, really important. Generative AI does a fantastic job of organizing that data and really kind of pulling out some of the proverbial needles in the haystack. And so you're going to see a lot of great stuff with retrospective. Some of these things we're testing. By the way, if you are a customer and you want to get on early access, some of the things we're talking about either are available or will be available shortly. So just let your customer success person know that you're interested in that, and we'll talk to you. So I think there's a lot of really great stuff that's going to happen in the retrospectives, and even telling you what you need to pay attention to. You think if you're a CIO, a CTO, and you're making an argument for budget, and you've got some KTLO, keep the lights on pieces of your application, maybe they're underinvested. Wouldn't it be great if you could have a data-driven view of if you should invest more or should not invest more in that application? Those are just some of the great things we're going to be able to deliver to our customers in the coming months. So super excited about that. Nick, I think with the stakeholders, the periodical updating, anything else that you can think of, how this helps newcomers or anybody else in the channel? I think you hit on some of it. Is really just when they get to a channel, they can get that information right away. I think that's huge.
Well, I think the other part about that too, Ken, is like, how do you then merge the two concepts? The one that we talked about earlier and showed a demo with Comms Assistant, and also summarization of what's happening in the channel. How do you merge those two concepts together, right? One of the ideas that we're talking about today is automation, right? And again, coming back to, you have a system of record, and there's all this information that we have related to the current incident, but also previous incidents. How do we leverage that information to not only be proactive during an incident, but also be prescriptive in terms of what the team should actually be doing, right? I'll give you an example, right? So, we're running through an incident. It's a SEV2 incident. I'm going through as an engineer, and I've added some, information about what's happening. As I continue to troubleshoot, I'm learning more and more about what's happening. I'm tagging information, and maybe this is impacting these specific customers or these areas around the world. And what I see a lot of the time with various companies out there is it's kind of tribal knowledge on them to figure out, well, now that I've added all this information, based off of that, I need to know that this is really not a SEV2, it's a SEV1. And I should really be then going to page my infrastructure service because they need to be involved, because we hit a peak number of users where anytime that happens, they need to get involved. And then I need to go and now send an updated communications to my executive channel because we've now increased the severity, right? A lot of the time, people don't know what they need to do in the moment because they're so focused on trying to put the fire out, right? And communication is definitely the first layer of that. But then how do I take steps that we've performed in the past to help solve problems and use those to our advantage to be more prescriptive in helping my incident responders know what they should be doing, right? So coming back to that example, it's a SEV2, we added all this information. As soon as I add that information, we have the power to come in and say, hey, based off of you adding this information, here's the workflow that I recommend you doing. Would you like me to go ahead and start that automation, right? Click a button, boom, here we go, right? So I think there's a lot of power, and there's a lot of potential to bridge the gap between AI and the automated workflows that we all know and love.
Yeah, let's jump in a little bit more, because one of the things, with Blameless, and the way we go about it is, we're integrated with all the things that you care about: ServiceNow, Jira, Opsgenie, PagerDuty, anything that a customer wants. And we're constantly adding additional integrations, Google Docs, Office 365. It's pretty exciting to think about what you do, because you think about, like, for example, in an outage, let's just talk about, the future state. Some of the things that we're doing with customers right now is when you get into the incident, as you mentioned, you've got 400 lines of Slack to get up to speed. Well, what if you could get the quick summaries of immediately what happened? Let's face it, usually when something breaks, it's usually related to a change. Right. Well, what's great is if you understand the service catalog, we understand what team went to get paged, you can actually look at the change log in Jira and pull that right in. Hey, the things that this team has recently changed is this, upstream, downstream dependencies. Hey, by the way, there's another incident going on that's downstream of you. They may be related. Here's this incident. it gets really, really exciting about the speed that you can fix the issue, inform, become, productive solving it. And then, of course, we started to talk about the communication and post that, the retrospectives, and then the continuous improvement. But I'm really excited, on the fixing part. And then let's dig a little bit more into post fixing. Anything else you want to add on the fixing part?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, right? I always like to say that, incidents may be categorized similarly when you start an incident, but not every incident is going to be the same. They're constantly evolving, they're constantly changing. And when you look at it, there may be similarities, but everything's going to be unique. How do you adapt? How do you grow? How do you make sure you're putting the right process in play as you pivot, as you make a change? And I think that's the part that really stresses engineers out. Is it's like, to your point, it's like, oh, well, now I know that, 3 other services are impacted and I need to bring in other teams. And now I need to get those teams up to speed. And now I need to get those teams understanding of what they need to do, not only what they need to do, but also what we've already done so they don't repeat the same stuff, right? So it's like, how do we make sure that we can automate and get them up to speed as quickly as possible so it's not prolonging the outage? I think that's super important to think about, when you're thinking about this long term.
Yeah, and let's go a little bit beyond that with generative AI and what it does. And and I've been in what used to be monitoring, and back when I was at New Relic, we created the moniker observability, which everybody's in observability now. But
Right.
what customers really wanted is exactly what we're talking about. I remember one time going to Austin. There's a large, we'll just say a traditional big company that we've all heard of that was getting into cloud computing. And so I was sitting there talking with the team that built the console, for their new cloud computing offering. And that team was really getting beaten up a lot by the executives of the organization because they didn't really have good understanding of things that were upstream of them. So a lot of the services that this console manipulated or configured were other teams, other microservice teams. Those teams would have things, but the issue wouldn't show up in the other team service. It would show up in this console. And so I think when you think about post-incident resolution, now you've got something that understands we had this incident. We know what was upstream of us. We know what was downstream. We know if those things had incidents. We know the timelines. We know the metadata. We know the change logs of things. Now you can get really smart as an organization as what is really causing the root cause. Where do you need to invest in additional resiliency? And I think that's what companies have been looking for. And then, going back to the true holy grail, I think that people are looking for is, tell me what is going to happen. Like, I've got this data, like where are the things that are going to be big outages and issues if I don't address it? All of these things are going to be empowered with generative AI. And again, what's exciting, Nick, is that this is not like, even for a Blameless, where I'm pretty excited, we have, teams working on, is this isn't like in the future, it's now. We have this functionality now, and almost every single month we're adding more functionality. And again, if you get one of the demos, you can see more details of that.
Yeah.
Anything I missed there?
Yeah, one thing I want to double down on is the retrospective. And, it's, again, running through all of these different POCs with prospects. One of the things that I see constantly that gets overlooked when it comes to your retrospective process, you're putting a tool like Blameless in place for a reason, right? And a lot of people, the standard retrospective, you're asking your technical questions. To your point, Ken, you're understanding like, services impacted, your mitigation steps, all of that great stuff, which you should continue to be doing. But one thing that I always challenge my prospects on is also asking cultural questions around how is your process working for the team. And I think again, coming back to having historical data, the cool part about this is, like, for example, the AI makes a recommendation in terms of which workflow you should be following when a given set of information is added. Did you choose to adopt that workflow or not, right? That's something that can be recorded as part of your retrospective, right? So when you go into the next incident that looks similar with similar sets of traits, we're then able to say like, hey, last time we recommended this, you chose not to adopt it for these reasons. Maybe we should pivot and try a different approach this time. Maybe we recommend a different workflow now. Now you choose to adopt it. It worked perfectly. Maybe that's something that should become part of our standard process for this particular type of problem, right? If you're not using a tool where the process is working for the team, it's working for against the team, you're not actually improving, right? I always like to say incident management is very iterative. It's a constant improvement and it's constant change. And it's a good thing, right? But one of the challenges that I've seen is that not a lot of companies out there have a tool where they're able to actually make sense of it and drive those proactive changes. And I think that's the cool part about using, AI automation in conjunction with a tool like Blameless. So I love that you said that, Ken, because that's something that I literally have conversations with various prospects and customers on a daily basis about.
Makes sense. I'll ask if anybody has any questions to go ahead and feel free to post it. If you've got it, I think the chat should be open. So if you have any questions, Nick, before we start taking questions for anybody else, I thought let's answer some of the ones that I think that we hear, especially when we talk about generative AI. I would say the first thing I hear is love it. What model am I training?
Yeah.
And so the good news is, like, we call it secure AI, but basically we've built a system that allows you to either use a secluded AI instance with us, or you can actually post your own API key for ChatGPT. And then based on demand, we'll add additional systems that support. So for example, Azure's got some new things they're rolling out. So if your company makes a decision that they want to have their own instance, then we can actually plug into that and you get all of the same great functionality. So you get to use it today, you can use it with ChatGPT or that. So I get that one security question. Usually that goes over very well with the security teams. Any other common questions you're getting?
It's funny, I literally heard that question right before I got on this call, right? Because again, I was showcasing Comms Assistant. I think that that's something to really pay attention to, and a lot of people will have that question because there's sensitive information that's being put into incidents, whether we like it or not. And obviously having a single tenant architecture and a bunch of security around that helps, but it's something that's top of mind for a lot of people. So I think that that's definitely a relative question. I think it's really just going back to something you said earlier, Ken. It's really a lot of what generative AI will do is it's going to augment your expensive trained resources and getting their job done quicker and better, right? It's like you want to make sure that the people who can solve these problems are focused on solving the problems. And oftentimes there are resources out there that can help them get there, but they just don't know what is available to them, right? So they're going through their tribal knowledge of information. They're trying to figure out what will work and what's not working. And in reality, that information probably already exists in some capacity somewhere in some system, right? So I hear a lot of people that it's like, hey, one of the big things is how do I get people up to speed, right? Also, from an onboarding perspective, one of the things that I've recently talked about with a customer there in the insurance space, right? And they were asked, a big customer, hundreds of employees coming on board, and they're trying to understand how they can get their employees up to speed using Blameless, right? And I think that one of the cool parts about generative AI too is like, hey, I went ahead and I added some tags, right? Then we could be prescriptive and say, hey, based off of you adding those tags, this is what I would recommend doing next when it comes to Blameless. Here's how you could run that command. This is what it's going to do for you. And really helping the team learn how to use the tool best, to the best of its ability. So I think that's another use case that a lot of people overlook is kind of that onboarding or familiarization period. It also works for people that are coming on board to a new incident management team. What are the processes that we should be following? How do I make sure that if I'm the first responder, I feel comfortable and I don't need to go and page 500 people to actually make sure that we're being productive, right? So keep that one in mind as well. That's something to potentially think about.
Yeah, and you hit on something. So I think on the AI, what I hear is the secure AI. And when we explain that, I think that the good news is you'll be able to use our technology. And we think that's probably the way and approach many SaaS players do it. But you mentioned something else, Nick, that's really not related necessarily to AI, but just is PII data. And I'll just hit on that because, one of the things that we're seeing is that incident management automation and really ultimately driving enterprise reliability, which is, about fixing, it's about, communicating, it's about capturing the metadata, it's about the retrospectives, it's about doing a retrospective, building what I call a do not repeat plan. What are the things we need to do? Transmitting that electronically to Jira or ServiceNow, capturing it, reporting, all of those type of things, I think is really the things that drive enterprise reliability. But increasingly, I'm having conversations with CISOs, and what they're realizing is that team members are often using PII data inside their Slack channels, their Teams channels. And so security of that data, segmentation, and that's why we've spent a lot of time with RBAC, but I think that also goes back to system design. One of the things that's unique with Blameless, a lot of systems out there are set up when a customer onboards, it's simply a database entry into that multi-tenant system, and their data is really commingled with other customers, just maybe secured by a unique identifier that says that's that customer. When you use Blameless, we actually create your own compute instance, your own database instance that's segmented off from anybody else, which, from a security and compliance is something that's really important. But anyways, I think we've got a couple of questions. Let's dig into the Q&A session. Again, if anybody else has any questions, feel free to post them now. First question, what are some areas in the retrospectives process besides the summarization of the incident that you think generative AI can influence? You want to take that first, Nick?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting topic. And again, something I feel really strongly about. One of the reasons why I joined Blameless, again, is because learning from problems is something that I feel often gets overlooked, and something that I was really passionate about from previous lives, and really making sure that we can uphold those standards. And, when it comes to other areas from the retrospective, besides that summarization, anyone that may talk to me knows that going back to those cultural questions that I talked about earlier, these are definitely areas that you should be paying attention to. But, you want to be able to use your retrospective to be able to gauge how that process is working, right? So again, coming back, I think one of the areas that I think is extremely helpful is you're automating various steps in your incident management process. You don't want to just automate for the sake of automation, right? I think a lot of people, they hear the word automation, they're like, oh, my life is going to be so much easier. We don't have to worry about anything ever again. The system's just going to do everything for me, right? But if you're automating the wrong process, it's actually could make your life harder, right? And I think that one of the nice parts about the retrospective and the power of using AI in conjunction with this process is going back to what I was talking about earlier, where if I prescribe a workflow based off of historical trends, or there was a particular hotspot that we saw and these steps were prescribed that we needed to follow, and we decided that we were going to take this, then that's going to be some sort of validation for the system to say, hey, next time we encounter something similar, I'm going to go ahead and recommend this. Whereas there's also the inverse of that, is having that validation to say, hey, this is what I'm recommending. These steps will be automated. Do you actually want to go ahead and execute this? Or does this something look a little bit off? Would you rather go through these steps one by one? Maybe I want to adopt 2 out of the 5. Maybe I don't want to adopt any of them. But being able to come in and make that human, how do I say it?
Decision
Yeah, exactly. Be able to put a set of eyes on it and say, hey, this actually does look good. Is one, it's training the system to say, hey, next time, this is exactly what I'm going to do. But it's also making sure that the team doesn't just blindly start doing things like paging different people that don't need to be involved, or sending out communications that weren't viewed first, right? And the retrospective is a perfect way of documenting in that section what's working, what's not working.
Yeah, so I jump in on generative AI and retrospectives. I think the couple of key areas that will be easy to address quickly is timelines, automating timelines. I think pulling in, what changed, like for example, the details of maybe it's in Jira or whatever tool you're using. What are the changes that happened at that time? The do not repeats, capturing, the submission and the new tickets and what are they called in Jira in the retrospective so that you can trace those better. And I think also cascading dependencies and being able to understand that. Those would be some off the top of my head. Got another question. How can generative AI help incident responders in terms of what tasks they are assigned to complete during the resolution process, and which user or team should be responsible for the completion of those steps?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, right? And it goes back to a lot of the automation that I see people they focus on when they first bring on a tool like Blameless is setting up the automation at the beginning of the incident, right? So bringing in the right stakeholders, communicating out to the right parties, but then also putting the right tasks in place. And by the way that this question was worded, that's what I'm assuming that you're talking about here, right? Is you start an incident with a series of tasks that you need to complete so that you can drive towards that resolution point. But what I said earlier, it's like every single incident is going to be slightly different. So as you learn new information, how do you pivot and how do you, make sure that what you're actually working on is still relevant to the problem at hand, right? And I think that's where generative AI and automation coming together, learning from historical context, allows you to then, pivot to your point, Ken, earlier, maybe there are some downstream services that are impacted and different teams need to be involved and they need to get up to speed with what information has already been done. And they have a different set of tasks now. And maybe now something that was assigned to me as I originally started the incident is now assigned to a different team. Making sure that everybody's on the same page is critical, but then also making sure that these tasks are put into the hands of the right person, I think is super important. Is something that AI can definitely help with.
Yeah, no, I think good one. It looks like I think we don't have any other questions. So what I will say is, again, we've got a link if you would like, a demo discussion specifically customized to your company on generative AI and what we're seeing happen in incident management. Just click the link. Aaron, maybe if you could drop it one more time in the chat before we go.
Yep.
Likewise, if you do have that, and it would be helpful, because again, I've done enterprise transformation and digital transformation at thousands of Fortune 500 and Fortune 5000 companies. Feel free to request me. I'd be happy to join the call with your team. And we really hope this was informative. So thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful Thursday. And again, just go to that link on the comms assistant to book that demo.
Come nerd out
Take
with
care.
us. It'll be fun.
Have a great Thursday, everyone.
Yep.